Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very accomplished professional from the world of communications and public relations from Hong Kong, Mary Devereux. Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here.
Mary is a senior advisor of Newgate, Greater China. She's a communications champion and she's an author. And all of you know, I'm very, very partial to authors. She's an author of a book titled, or she's a co-author of a book titled Public Relations in Asia Pacific, and we'll talk about that. So, Mary, let me start by asking you that, tell me a little bit about your journey and maybe one or two of your very exciting and fascinating experiences.
Gosh. My journey, for those of you who probably hardly hard to believe it, I started about 34 years ago. And any Gen Z listeners now probably won't believe this, but in those days, public relations and communications courses did not exist. You know, it was a made-up idea. And to get into public relations, you either had to be maybe a former journalist or perhaps be in the administrative side, and maybe sort of by accident end up working as, a secretary or an admin assistant for a PR firm. And that's the way I did it. I graduated with a degree in geography, which is of no use to anyone, as you may well know, Ashton. Yeah. And so I ended up, and I bless my mother to this day. My mother said, if you can't get a word, do a secretarial course, you can always type. And of course, who would have thought, you know, only 20 years later, typing is so important to everyone's business. But that's aside. So I ended up working for a PR firm. And then, as happened, I was lucky enough to be promoted and become account assistant. And then, and that was in the UK. And then I worked there for several years. And then I moved to Hong Kong in 1990. And I only meant to come to Hong Kong for maybe 1 or 2 years, but here I am, 33 years later, still working in Hong Kong and still loving it and calling it home.
And as they say, the rest is history.
Yes. I mean, I've worked for several different companies in that time. I'm right now, I work for a company called Newgate, which is the 21st biggest PR firm in the world. It just came out today in the Devereux rankings, which is rather good for us. So we're very lucky. We have offices all around the world in the US, Latin America, and Asia Pacific, and Europe, of course. But I've also worked for tiny companies with just 5 or 6 people in. But whether you're a big company or small company, you can still be in this business and make a real difference to your clients.
Wonderful. How wonderful. So Mary, now let's talk about your other role as a communications champion. And my first question to you is, why is effective communication so important for everyone?
Well, it's almost, to me, it's like the default position now for everybody. I mean, the ability to communicate, whether you're human to human or maybe animal to animal, we all have methods of communicating. We are fortunate to have our ancestors to have developed the language. So we have an ability to be quite precise with what we need and what we mean to say, whereas obviously animals don't have so much luck. But I believe the ability to communicate clearly your meaning, what you're actually, for your emotion as well is so important for individuals as it is for companies. So you know, I was naturally, I'm not a linguist by nature, but I was naturally drawn to the industry because, you know, I really care about words and how they're said and what they really mean. And particularly when you come to today's politics, who knows what some of the politicians really mean when what they're saying? We can make a good guess, but you know, but when I call myself a communication champion because, you know, my big role in life is to help my clients, you know, really define what their purpose is in life and then decide how they can best communicate that purpose, be it to their customers or be it to politicians or be it to maybe shareholders and investors.
Well said. And based on the vast experience that you have and having worked with so many different individuals, what are some of the communication challenges common, people face, whether it's in organizations or as human beings?
A lot of people, even though they're very senior, they're CEOs of companies, they are quite shy. It's quite a surprise to me, who's actually never been shy in her life. To find immensely important people are very nervous when say I set up a media interview with a CEO, and I find that CEO requires so much briefing in advance about what messages he or she are going to say, when to me that's quite odd, when you think that they've already, they run the company, surely they must know what to say. But it's interesting that everybody, there is no such thing as a perfect person. Everybody has a weakness, and I found in my industry that often that weakness is actually quite an innate shyness, or maybe a lack of wishing to show their real feelings, because I think a lot of people are a little bit nervous about showing their emotions. I'm not. I think having a good EQ is very important, and it makes your life so much better if you can communicate, human to human. But not everyone finds that easy, and part of my job is to help people overcome that shyness. Sometimes it means actually, we create the words for them, but then we have to make sure when they say the words, they really belong to them. They're not just like reading a script, and that's terrible. But interesting. I don't know if you find that with some of your interviewees, they are quite nervous.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But the other thing that I have also seen when I go and speak on a large stage with thousands of people, a lot of people have stage fright. So even if they are able to communicate well, they are not able to do it on a stage. What are your perspectives?
Yes, it's interesting, but people tend to have preferences. On a human basis, my preference is for a small group of people. I'd much rather go to a small dinner party than go to a large party. But I'm not scared of a big party. And I have to confess, I get a bit of a kick about going on a big stage. Just recently, I've been on 2 panel discussions, only about, not thousands, only about 50 people in each of them, about generative AI, which, as you know, is all the topic at the moment. And we did a breakfast meeting, and my three fellow panelists were too nervous to eat breakfast, and I suddenly realized I was the only one eating my baked beans and sausages. So I was so excited to get a British breakfast, and I realized how nervous they were. But it's not because I care less. I guess it's because I do this for a living, so I know how to brief myself. So but I certainly do empathize with those who are. So there's lots of tools you can practice. It just practice almost like shouting backstage. Obviously, knowing what you're going to say is key, and always remembering that the audience wants you to succeed. It's a very, very, unless you're a stand-up comedian where you're expecting people to harass you. Everybody wants you to do well. So I think you need to remember that when you go on any stage, they want to hear what you say, and they want to hear it well.
Well said, well said. And since you just mentioned generative AI, let me ask you my next question on that. That, with ChatGPT and so many other platforms, writing a speech has become easy. Just saying, ChatGPT, write me a speech for 5,000 words. But my question to you is, Mary, how is technology changing the way we communicate?
Did you know? I'll just sort of take you on a little journey from my history. When I was probably about 7 years old, my father brought home a calculator, and we were amazed by it and spent days playing with it. And then years went past, and typewriters went from manual to electric. Then my first PR job, we had a word processor, which you could type a single line, and you could only change that single line. My first job, we had a telex machine with a tape used to put through. So, I've been through so many different forms of technology. I distinctly remember, and I can picture myself in my office. I was at Ogilvy PR in Hong Kong in 1995, and I was looking at the internet. I bought the internet in a box from CompuServe, and I decided, after looking at it and playing with it, that I didn't need to learn about the internet. By the time it became big, I probably would have retired. Okay. 2 years later, we were using email for everything. We had our own email servers. And look at this, we now have mobile phones. We have had the dot-com bubble. We've got probably what's going to become a bit of an AI bubble. I'm hearing stories about people just saying, oh, we're going to set up an AI company, and then they're getting investors without even having an idea yet. Yep. So, I mean, this too will pass. I'm not sure. There's oh gosh, I wish I could remember his name. Amos Law, a scientist in the US called Paul Amos said, in the short run, we tend to overestimate technology, but in the long run, we tend to underestimate it. So I think AI is going through this same bubble that many technologies have before. A lot of excitement. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We've got to be kept up with it. I mean, we've got to learn about it, and I am learning about it. But I'm also treading very cautiously. I mean, it's not perfect yet. It's a work in progress.
Yep, great response. Thank you. Let me now move to and ask you a few questions about the campaigns that you run. Right. I don't want any names of any organizations.
That's okay.
Confidential. But share with me one or two of your successful communication campaigns. And what was it that made a campaign successful?
Interesting. I think they're not necessarily the biggest campaigns, but I think I'm happy to share the names because they're both insurance firms. Who I am one of those bizarre people who likes insurance, and long before the world became very entranced about the concept of mental health, both of these firms decided that mental health and well-being at work was very important, and they both started doing this is AXA and Cigna, so and fair play to them, and they realized the importance of workplace wellness, and so they started tracking it on a global basis to see how people were reacting, or how people were reacting to stress, to burnout, and more importantly, what they could do to help people in these situations. And both these companies now have well-formed indexes, which people can now use and see how the world has changed towards mental health in particular. And I'm a huge supporter of mental health, mental wellness in the workplace, which is, was so ignored. And there are so many now tools that we can use, online tools, or just simple talking to other people to know that you're not alone in this world. And I think a lot of people in PR and in advertising and all these very long-hour businesses are recognizing this, and I'm proud to have gotten those kind of campaigns. I mean, I've worked on toothpaste campaigns, cola campaigns, technology campaigns, but I think I'm most proud of the work I've done in the world of healthcare. That's where you can, you really are making a difference, and where communications matter.
Well said. And how important is storytelling, Mary, in communication? And what are some interesting tips to create a compelling story?
That's good. I love telling a good story. And if you do, I have a minute. I'll tell you a story, and you can see.
Please do.
Okay, right. So picture this. It's Sunday afternoon. I'm in Bangkok. It's 1990. I'm not going to tell the year, but it's a long time ago. And I'm in the office, sadly, on a Sunday with my colleagues in Bangkok. And we have been spending months preparing for the arrival of Michael Jackson, who is going to be performing on his Dangerous tour in Asia. And his first concert's going to be in Bangkok. So we're feeling pretty calm. We've got things ready. He's not arriving till Thursday. That's when the first concert is. And we're feeling good. But we're in the office because we're busy. Suddenly, the head of our office comes in with the head of Pepsi, who is the sponsor of Michael Jackson, looking white-faced and affluent, saying, Michael Jackson's arriving tonight in Bangkok. And not only is he arriving tonight, he expects to have a huge crowd of people welcoming him in at the hotel. So we sort of look at each other and say, well, this is a Sunday night, and, Bangkok is no different from any other country. The kids go to school on Monday morning. Their parents won't be allowing them out to form a crowd. How are we going to form a crowd? And so this was great communications. This was just, we rang everybody we knew. We emailed. WhatsApp didn't exist at that time, but we called our friends, our family. We called the waiter downstairs in our local restaurant. And in the end, we managed to get a crowd of people, including everybody from Pepsi, everybody from Ogilvy, standing outside the hotel, which I'm afraid we badly used plastic. We used plastic straws and stuck on pictures of Michael Jackson to make flags. And as he drove in, we shouted, "Michael, Michael, we love you." And to this day, I wish, this was pre-digital phones, and I wish I had a photograph of the CEO of Pepsi standing with a plastic flag saying, "Michael, we love you." So it all worked out well. Michael Jackson was happy with the reception, and the concerts went ahead. However, what happened afterwards is a whole other story, and cancellations and things, but at least that one thing went well. So I like a story to kind of start off with an exciting beginning. And of course, if you've got a good character mention like Michael Jackson, you always know you're going to get people's attention. So I think most good stories, like any sort of narrative, they have maybe a problem or a challenge, and then that story shows you how you overcame the challenge. But you also want to make it, something that you can relate to. I mean, you probably can imagine yourself having to stand outside at midnight with a plastic straw waving.
Correct. Well said. My next question to you is on culture, Mary.
Yes.
Whether it's our individual culture, whether it's organizational culture, or the culture of the country that we belong to. There are some people who will keep saying that let my work do its talking. There are some people who will say, I did this, I did this, I did this. How important is culture, and what is the impact of culture on communication?
Culture for me, is first of all, I very much relate it to the country's culture, first of all. And having been in Asia, I mean, I've been based in Hong Kong, but I've worked in pretty well every single country within Asia Pacific. So I'm certainly cautious, wary, excited, all those emotions at the same time. I think it's, when you're talking culture, you've just got to get the advice of your local colleagues to make sure you know what to do and what can do. And it's just so important but if you're talking about corporate culture, that's a whole different thing, because every company has another culture. So you might be dealing with like a very large corporation which has a distinct way of saying and doing things, and then you plonk them in China and they've got a very different way of saying and doing things, and you've got to marry the two. I'll share with you a quick story which I think may resonate with some of you. I used to work in Korea. Part of my 33 years, I set up Ogilvy PR in Seoul. And in my second week, I was taken to the PR association meeting. It was for their lunch. It was all in Korean language, but that didn't matter. I was just expected to sit there and nod politely and listen to the organ. And so that happened. I ate my lunch. I nodded a lot when I could see there were things being said on the panel. And at the end of the lunch, there was one question asked, and it wasn't asked to the panel, it was asked to me. And I was asked, was I married? Which, was, I've got to say, I was not expecting that question, I was saved, fortunately, by one of the panelists who said, she's free, but, she's very fussy, and I was very saved. But that really taught me a lesson. Not even when you think you're being in a calm and safe space, are you ever totally safe from the unexpected. So I guess with culture, I've just learned to expect the unexpected wherever I go. And that's exciting too, and as it happens, it's turned into a great story.
Absolutely. Well said. So one more question on communication, then I want to move for a few minutes to your book. Based on all the vast experience you have, what do you think sets apart a great communicator from a good communicator?
Gosh. There's all the usual skills like having a nose for news, understanding what the company's purpose is so you can elucidate it well. And I think probably what makes a person a great communicator is someone who can convince the client. And I don't mean bully, I mean convince, can create a good enough, can create a convincing argument about why this type of communication should be done in this certain way. And so that sometimes doesn't mean you have to, 99% you're right, but it means that you've listened to other people, you've got everyone's opinions, and you've weighed up, if we're choosing a social media channel, the way to do which one are we going to focus on? At the end of the day, someone's got to make the decision, and that great communicator is also a great leader of people. I tend to find, that the great communicators are ones who can also motivate people.
Well said. Well said. So I'm now going to move to your book. You're the author of a book titled Public Relations.
We love our book.
in Asia, of course. Public relations in Asia Pacific. I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Mary Devereux's book, Public Relations in Asia Pacific. I will do the same. Tell me a little bit about your book and what was the reason for writing it?
Well, my colleague who I used to work with, and she's now actually living back in England, and she's a professor, and she teaches public relations and marketing, and we were all frustrated by the fact that all the textbooks about public relations, that none of them about Asia Pacific. They always talk about examples from the US, UK, and every book you open has got the Tylenol crisis as the number one, and we just got so tired of reading the same book. And then we thought, well, why don't we just write our own book then?
Correct.
So we wrote, and the title does not sound exciting because, we took advice of SEO advisors, and so we just called it Public Relations in Asia Pacific. It is what it is. And what we do, we take people through the core aspects of public relations, but we give it the cultural spin, of the different countries we're working in, and we give examples from different countries in Asia. And in fact, we're actually very honored because we're just being approached by a different publisher, Emerald Publishing, to do a second edition. Wow. So in fact, Anne and I are desperately typing away to finish up the deadline in June, and the second edition will be out in sort of late this year. So if you are thinking of buying, I would suggest you wait to get the new edition.
Wonderful. Thank you. And my last question to you, Mary, and this is for the thousands of people who will listen to our conversation.
Okay.
What would you say are 3 lessons you would like our viewers and listeners to take away when you talk about communication?
Oh, gosh. Oh, you snuck that question in. I think anybody can be a good communicator. It's not a magic, it's not a mystique thing that a few people can do. It is something everybody does automatically, and you can learn to be a better communicator just by practicing and by getting some tips from people. I think I would like all communicators to really think about the purpose of what they're communicating, because words are very important, but words can also do great harm. If said badly, and I really want to see people use words to good effect and to help the world become a better place. I know that sounds right airy-fairy. And the third thing is, that's it really. I think
that's
2 things are enough. 2 things are enough.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And on that note, Mary, and you have 2 wonderful lessons. Anybody can communicate. There's no magic about it. And that old line which says practice makes perfect. So I think that's a very critical part of communication. And second, you said it is so important to understand the purpose you're communicating. Yes. I think that purpose, if it's well defined, will not create any kind of challenges for anybody who you're communicating with. Thank you so much for speaking.
You said it so much better.
No, thank you so much for speaking to me about your own wonderful journey. Thank you for speaking to me about so many different aspects of communication. Thank you for speaking to me about your book, and all the very best for your forthcoming edition of your new book. Thank you again, and good luck.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute honor to be on this. Thank you indeed.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for The Brand Called You.